Yes, I can.
I wanted to ask you something else I've heard a lot in the last 24 hours, is that we've missed the gender issue because we've made it too much of a race issue. As a black professional woman, what do you think of that?
I think that's absolutely right. I think that this case, at the heart of it, is a case about domestic violence, about physical violence in a relationship and an abusive relationship. And I think that, you know, that race seems to have, you know, made insignificant that major issue. And I think that that's a far more legitimate and righteous theme in this case.
How do you think your community, this is, again, I always apologize for asking you to speak for an entire community, but how do you think the Los Angeles black community has changed, if it has changed, since the Rodney King case?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of confirmation in this community about the what people have known for many, many years, and that is that there is a racist, white supremacist element in the Los Angeles Police Department that has engaged in excessive force and particularly victimized minorities in the city. I mean, this is the reality of my brothers, my father, and I think that what Rodney King did for this city was to give people significance, validate their experience.
Can I just ask you this, and then maybe ask very quickly the same question of Mr. Mack and also Mr. Curtis. Can you imagine a black middle-class jury in Los Angeles completely ignoring the evidence and saying, whatever Mr. Simpson did, what the Los Angeles Police Department did was worse?
I can't imagine it, although I think I'm in the minority. I mean, I think that that would be an absolutely legally, evidentiary, and immoral decision to reach in this case.
Mr. Mack, let me ask you the same question. Or I'm sorry, Mr. Curtis, can you answer that question for me?
Certainly. In a few seconds, I agree with Ms. Lomax. I can't imagine any jury, for that matter, ignoring the entirety of the evidence that's been presented.
Okay, thank you very much. In a short time, we'll ask Ray Brown here in New York with us the same question. But for the moment, we're going to take a brief commercial break, and then we shall be back. We are very close to a verdict which everybody in this country that has watched television for months and months on ends appears to be waiting for.
He's a loan shark.
I'm the one telling you how it is.
He's got no respect for us.
He's a producer.
So you make movies, huh?
A major Hollywood player.
Together, they're going to make a killing.
Yesterday, you were a loan shark.
Yeah, but I was never that into it.
John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Rene Russo, and Danny DeVito.
Thought of a title yet?
Get Shorty.
All right, what's my motivation?
Rated R. Starts Friday, October 20th at theaters everywhere.
Ready?
It's the last night of this century.
I'm the magic man.
For a man who's seen too much.
This is conspiracy paranoia.
For a woman who won't back down.
Calm down, baby. This is what I do.
Strange days are coming.
Cheer up, world's gonna end in 10 minutes anyway.
Strange Days, rated R. Friday, October 13th at theaters everywhere.
ABC News coverage of O.J. Simpson, The Verdict, continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Well, we don't wish to add to the anticipation nor the anxiety either, but we are just a couple of minutes away from that moment when we do anticipate that Judge Ida, who's presided over this trial, will ask the jury to come in. The process is fairly straightforward. The jury will return the foreman number one, as we know, a black professional woman in her 50s, who said at one point, "I'm coming to do a job." We'll hand to the clerk the verdict, and of course there's more than one verdict that's being required here. The clerk is going to unseal it. Her name's Deirdre Robertson. You've heard her referred to many times by the judge. She will then hand it to Judge Ito. He will then read the verdict silently. He will then hand it back to Mrs. Robertson. It's not quite like the movies, as some of us have discovered. And Mrs. Robertson, the clerk of the court, will read it. And then she will say to the jury, "So say you one, so say you all," lest, and Cynthia McFadden, our legal affairs correspondent, has been very helpful in so many ways. But recently, Cynthia, you still there? Okay, she's gone for the moment back into the courtroom, but she reminded us this morning that there is a genuine possibility, and it has happened in the past, where when a jury reaches a conclusion like this and then seals it and is given an opportunity to think about it again overnight, One juror may say, well, I'm not absolutely sure, and I want to reconsider this. That is not entirely out of the question, and therefore the jury would be asked to go back and resolve its differences. But that verdict, as you know, has now been sealed for some time. And after Mrs. Robertson reads it and asks the jury if they say one and they say all, then there will be an opportunity for the defense or the prosecution to actually poll the jury so that they have some very precise indication that it was a unanimous verdict in this case. Then there'll be an opportunity, and by the way, in this case, it's very often the losing side which wants the jury polled. And then there'll be an opportunity for members of the defense or the prosecution team to question the members of the jury. All this within a reasonable time frame right after the verdict has been read. And this is largely, so Cynthia McFadden, our legal affairs correspondent, tells us, so that they can prepare for the future, so that they can have some sense, one way or the other, of what it was about their case that worked and did not work. And there may, as we said, be this opportunity to question them, though that is not obviously automatic. If Mr. Simpson is acquitted, there are a couple of options for him there on the 9th floor of the criminal courts building. The judge may say to him, you're a free man and you're free to go this moment. It is thought to be at the moment more likely that the judge will say to him that he should return to the Los Angeles County Jail and be processed out sometime in the next several hours. Mr. Simpson has now come back to the courtroom. We can't show you that because there's that now famous picture there of the seal under the camera's orders. But I can tell you that last night his family and his friends, some of them joined together at his residence up on Rockingham Drive. The mood was described to us as light and tense, which may seem like a contradiction in terms, perhaps the effort to keep it light, but everybody having to do with this case, let alone the people watching it, are tense. As for himself, Mr. Simpson in his jail last night had visits from F. Lee Bailey, one of the members of his defense team, Robert Kardashian, his old friend Skip Taft, his business manager and lawyer, and also one of his business agents. Ironically, Mr. Simpson has done more business from his prison cell this year and may have made more money than he did last year. I don't think we all realized how quite active his life was in some ways while he has been in his cell all this time. But he's managed to go on a great deal of the time. Here is the judge, Ito, in this courtroom.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Kardashian, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Blazier. People are represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, and Mr. Hodgman. The jury is not present. Good morning, counsel. Good morning, Your Honor. All right, the record should reflect that earlier this morning at 9 o'clock, the court met informally with counsel here in the courtroom, because there are too many lawyers to go into chambers this morning, for the purposes of discussing notifications to the jurors regarding their rights of privacy and the interest of the news media to interview them or speak to them following the delivery of the verdict in court here today. The court distributed to the parties copies of the questionnaire that has been distributed to the jurors, and also the notice to them regarding confidentiality under 237 of the Code of Civil Procedure. And those two questionnaires have been returned by the jurors. They have uniformly indicated their desire that their private information remain confidential. They have also indicated to the court unanimously a desire not to speak to the attorneys after the conclusion of the trial, and not to speak with the news media either. All right, counsel, is there anything else we need to take up before I invite the jurors to join us? All right, Deputy Trower, let's have the jurors, please.
As the jury comes in, let's just tell you briefly, there may be a couple of reasons why the jury has decided not to talk to the attorneys or the news media, certainly to the news media, because some of them, not all of them necessarily, but certainly some of them have made extracurricular arrangements with publishers and or others to tell their stories for money, to put it bluntly. The jury will be coming in now. We just remind you again that in the last day or so, they have been under the closest scrutiny at any time in this trial because the 10 women, the 2 men, 9 African Americans, 2 whites, and 1 Latino made this decision in what was regarded by virtually all of the legal analysts who had been on this case for so long as having made a very rapid decision. And it has been fascinating to watch and listen to them all across the country. In all the media in the last 24 hours, no offense intended, back as quickly as they can into a position of saying they have not much more to go on than their gut instincts. And saying again, as been said so many times, that the jury has, in their view, reason to find reasonable doubt. Also has, in their view, reason to find that Mr. Simpson was guilty based on the evidence. Here again is Judge Ito.
And the record should reflect that we have now been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel and our alternates. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Mrs. Robertson, would you, do you have the envelope with the sealed verdict forms, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, would you give those to Deputy Trower? And would you return those to our 4-person juror number 1? All right, Madam 4-person, would you please open the envelope and check the condition of the verdict forms?
There are 4 forms, and there is the question of first or second degree murder or acquittal. They're not long, but there are 4 of them.
All right, Madam 4-person, you've had the opportunity to review the verdict forms.
Yes.
Are they the same forms that you signed, and are they in order?
Yes, they are.
All right, would you hand those, please, to Deputy Trower? And you have signed and dated those verdict forms indicating the jury's verdict?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen and of the jury, I'm going to ask that you carefully listen to the verdicts as they are being read by the clerk, Mrs. Robertson. As after the verdicts have been read, you will be asked if these are your verdicts. And I would caution the audience during the course of the reading of these verdicts to remain calm, and that if there is any disruption during the reading of the verdicts, the bailiffs will have the obligation to remove any persons disrupting these proceedings. All right, Mrs. Robertson. All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury? Mrs. Robertson.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in Count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this second day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
All right, counsel, Mr. Simpson, would you be seated, please? Let's have it quiet in the courtroom, please. All right, Mrs. Robertson, would you please poll the jurors?
Poll the jurors. Juror number 1, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 2, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 3, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 1, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 5, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 6, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 7, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 8, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 9, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 10, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 11, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 1, is this your verdict? Okay, count 2. Juror number 1, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 2, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 3, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 4, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 5, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 6, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 7, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 8, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 9, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Yes. Juror number 10, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 11, as to count 2, is this your verdict? Juror number 12, as to count 2, is this your verdict?
All right, the clerk is directed to record the verdicts as read. The parties agree to waive reading of the verdicts as recorded. Mr. Cochran, do you waive reading of the verdicts as recorded? Yes, we do. Ms. Clark, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to at this time take this opportunity to publicly thank you for the service that you've given to us. The burdens that we've placed upon you were enormous, and words can't begin to express the debt that we owe to you for the time and patience and exertion that you've given to us during the course of this case. I will have an opportunity to meet with you privately later, and I'll give you my private comments when we have a chance to meet. I want to caution you at this time that there is, as you know, intense media interest in this case. The news media will probably seek you out at your home or at your place of business. And I would implore that the news media act responsibly to avoid harassing you or identifying you without your consent or otherwise causing you concern. Whether you wish to cooperate with the news media is, of course, entirely up to you. However, I must warn you to expect the worst as far as that is concerned. We want to, I know I share with you in expressing our thanks to the bailiffs from the Sheriff's Department, to our court reporters, Ms. Moxham and Ms. Olson, to the research attorney, John Byrne, who's assisted us, our Pepperdine law clerks, Mr. Golub and Ms. Carswell, our media liaison, Jerry Ann Hazlett and her staff, and of course the jury commissioner, Gloria Gomez, and her staff. All right, counsel, is there anything we need to take up before we excuse the jurors? Mr. Cochran?
One last time.
Well, you can see precisely what we can see. Mr. Goldman's family, sister profoundly shaken by this, and elsewhere in the courtroom you can see that in another way Mr. Simpson's family is profoundly moved in many ways, and Nicole Brown's sisters.
All right, ladies and gentlemen
mother,
of the jury, I am
have their children.
now going to excuse you from further service on this case. As you know, this does absolve you from your vows of silence. You may take with you your juror notebooks as you have requested, and we'll be chatting with you shortly. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you all later. All right.
F. Lee Bailey, Mr. Simpson, Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro to the left, Robert Kardashian, his friend and lawyer, there in tears, as was O.J. Simpson's oldest son, Jason.
Have a seat, please.
And as we said, there's an alternative. There's an alternative now for him to, under normal circumstances, walk out if you're a free man, but he will, in all likelihood, go back to the Los Angeles County Jail and be processed.
All right, Ms.
out.
Clark, Mr. Cochran.
And there is now an opportunity for members of the family, members of the press who've been there for all these many days to leave the courtroom and go about their business. For Marcia Clark and
transported to an appropriate chair's facility and released forthwith. All right, we'll stand in recess.
Marcia Clark and others now enormous, in legal terms, an enormous defeat, certainly an enormous victory for Johnny Cochran and Mr. Simpson's defense team. And we now go outside the Los Angeles Criminal Courts building, where Ken Kashiwahara is out there on the steps. First, Ken, I assume there's been a reaction out there. Well, we can't do much more than show you pictures, and it doesn't look, quite frankly, much different than it was earlier. And it doesn't need much review from us that O.J. Simpson is acquitted of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And we'll now try to talk to Ken Kashiwahara, who's on the steps. Ken? Yeah, we're not able to hear him. Ken, we're not able to hear you for a second, so when they get your mic going, we'll get probably what kind of reaction. You can see out there on the street itself the support, the jury. The jury's been through a great deal in the last 24 hours particularly. And we will do now what we always do we've always been doing for the last year or so. We're going to go and talk to some of our legal analysts. We're going to go right here to New York first to Raymond Brown, who's a defense attorney, past president of the Criminal Defense Lawyers of New Jersey, and ask you, Mr. Brown, your reaction.
I must tell you that I've defended this process before I knew what the verdict is. I think it's a fair verdict. It'll be much criticized. We have to remember that there's an ancient tradition that's not a black tradition but an American tradition, that when the sovereign is corrupt, the sovereign loses the right to go into court and ask that its proofs be believed.
Put that in contemporary language for us.
Well, what it means is that when the framers built the Constitution, they said reasonable doubt exists so that the sovereign has to prove it and demonstrate that it's honest. When the prosecuting authority puts cops on the stand who have a racist background, and the defense then says you can't trust any of their evidence because they're biased against this defendant because he's violated an ancient American taboo that is a cross-racial relationship, then the defense has a time-honored argument, which is don't trust any of their proofs. And while this verdict will be much criticized, I think it's unfair to suggest that because it was a largely black jury, that this verdict was based on racial identification with this defendant.
Forgive me if I read into something, but you're sounding slightly defensive there about this will be much criticized.
I know what's coming. I anticipated. We heard the rumblings of it for the last 24 hours as people said this verdict is much too fast, as they criticized Johnny Cochran's defense summation as an appeal to racism. But I think it's unfair and it's unreasonable because this jury was chosen by a process which is designed to produce a fair jury, and they've deliberated in a manner that they saw fit. This is an ancient tradition.
Okay, let's go to Los Angeles to Robert Filibosian. Mr. Filibosian, you've been with us since the very beginning. What's your first reaction?
Peter, there is no way to know what facts, pardon me, or what emotion on which this jury based its verdict. We don't know whether they based it on the fact that Mark Furman made these racial comments. We don't know whether or not they based it on just a determination that, in fact, they felt that there was reasonable doubt. that they felt the prosecution had not put on sufficient facts or testimony or evidence, regardless of racial issues, regardless of gender issues, to get over the reasonable doubt burden. We don't know that. It would be premature and wrong for anyone to comment without knowing what was in the juror's mind.
And I just remind you that members of the jury decided they did not want to discuss this with either the lawyers or the public. So until they, at their own volition and at their own pace, decide to talk to whomever they decide to talk to, we are not going to have any real sense of how the jury went in this particular direction. Outside again to Ken Kashimahara. Ken?
Peter, as emotional as it was inside the courtroom, it was nearly as emotional out here, although in a different sense. The minute the verdict was read, there was a loud roar from the crowd.
Let me just interrupt you. You've got, it looks like Johnny Cochran's security guard coming out right behind you there from the Nation of Islam.
Actually, they're going in, Peter.
Oh, they're going in, sorry.
Yeah, they've been going in all morning, in fact. But anyway, there was a loud roar from the crowd across the street, and it went on for a number of minutes. There's a line of police across the street keeping them back, but I don't think there's any danger of them charging across the street. It was really more of a celebration.
Are these people outside the courthouse this morning the usual collection of, you know, let's be there for the frenzy? Or I mean, there's people out here dancing and cheering. Can you give me any read as to who they might be?
Yeah, I think you have some of those, but I think you also have some people who work in this area. You see people in suits, and you see people dressed for work. So I think it's a real mixture.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken. Our legal affairs correspondent, Cynthia McFadden, has come out of the courtroom now. Cynthia, we saw quite a bit of what happened in the courtroom. The camera was panning all over the place, and various family members, but what was your own take?
Well, Peter, you could actually hear inside the courtroom a large cheer go up in the hallway outside courtroom 103 when the verdict was announced. It was very strange indeed. There were only 69 seats in the courtroom, about 15 or 20 people spilling out from the door behind the courtroom and then into the judges' chambers. These were primarily security and court personnel. The families, of course, dissolved in tears before and after the verdict. Before the camera was turned on, Peter, I can tell you that Jason Simpson came into the courtroom sobbing so hard that his sister Arnell had to support him to a seat. At one point, Robert Shapiro was so concerned about Jason Simpson that he actually came over to comfort him, as did Dale Cochran, Johnny Cochran's wife. This was before the camera came on. Before the camera came on and before the verdict was read, Tanya and Dominique Brown, both in tears, sobbing, Mrs. Brown looking straight ahead. When O.J. Simpson was brought into the courtroom, I don't know if you could see this on camera, Peter, he gave a big smile to his family sitting in the front row and then raised his eyebrows as a sort of, you know, it's going to be okay. He sat down, looked at the jury, Johnny Cochran holding his arm as the verdict was actually read. The jurors impassive throughout. The jurors had no expression on their faces as these verdicts were read, and then when they were polled, again, no visible expression whatsoever.
Okay, Cynthia, thank you. We'll come back to you in just a minute. There's certainly going to be a whole reassessment of how to read juries in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Remember, though, the focus is very quickly here again, as it has been before, on the black dimension of the jury and the racism factor in the case Mark Furman and the whole Los Angeles Police Department conspiracy, as has been argued, to plant evidence. It may well be that the gloves don't fit. Remember the famous Johnny Cochran line, if they don't fit, you have to acquit. That may be also a major factor in the jury's consideration. There are lots of little bits that have always been argued as elements of reasonable doubt if that was the direction the jury chose to go. Let us go now for a first reaction also from the University of California, Los Angeles, Peter Aronella. What do you think, Peter?
Well, Peter, I think a couple of points have to be made. First of all, this is not over, and I think people have to understand that. There are two civil lawsuits for wrongful death, and the fact of an acquittal only means that the prosecution couldn't prove Mr. Simpson's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't bar a successful civil suit for wrongful death where the burden of proof is less by a preponderance of the evidence and the composition of the jury might be different. Second point, I think this...
Peter, let me stop you just for a second.
Sure.
There. Sorry. The civil suit, however, doesn't involve anything except money, and in one case he's been sued for $50 million, right?
That's correct. Okay. That's absolutely correct. It just involves money.
Okay, sorry, go on.
The second point is the speed of this acquittal is stunning. This is a trial that took 9 months, and for the jury to deliberate for as short a time as it did indicates, I think, very clearly that these jurors individually all made up their minds a long time before closing argument. And as to what motivated them, Bob Filibostein is right. Until we hear from jurors, we can only guess. But I think it's impossible to believe, given the mountain of physical evidence involved implicating O.J. Simpson, that any explanation for reasonable doubt could be separated from Mark Furman. Mark Furman was the villain of the defense's story. Without Mark Furman as the villain, I wonder whether or not reasonable doubt could have been sown so well as to the gloves not fitting, as to cross-contamination at those labs. I think really Mark Furman played a very central role in this case, as well as the socks.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Aronell. We'll come back to you again in a while. A reminder, of course, that in many of the cases, we've been reminded of this several times in the last days, juries in at least 50% of cases, studies have shown, have made their minds up before actual closing arguments are made. Well, Barbara Walters is with us again from Los Angeles, and she has been sitting with Cato Kalin, waiting for this verdict to be handed down. Barbara?
Peter, Cato, as I looked at you and we were listening together, you were clenching your hands, you looked pained, your eyes were closed. Now you tell me what was going through your mind when you heard the verdict.
What was going on in my mind was when they showed the camera shots of the families, and I think it's just so very difficult to be on any side of the family, and it's the verdict of how it came out was the way the justice system is here. And I know that I mentioned before the 5 days of testimony here, and I was a little piece of this big hole that they're doing to fill. And
let me ask you something. You did tell me when we did an interview that you had come to an opinion from your own experience. Was your opinion the same as the jury's?
I think on this day that my opinion, it doesn't really matter on my opinion.
I didn't expect you to answer me. I just thought I had to ask. How do you feel about the verdict? How do you feel for O.J. Simpson, who was and perhaps still is your friend?
I feel terrible with this verdict that the Brown family does not have Nicole and the Goldmans do not have Ron. And I thought with the verdict, no matter what, they're not going to be coming back. And it's a very mixed feeling. It's just very shaking because I think people see this sometimes as a soap opera, and it was with people that I knew and that I cared about, and it was a part of my life. And
Cato, this is very interesting. Your concern, and many of us, many people, perhaps not many of us, feel, you know, the same concern, and certainly we are heartbroken when we look at the heartbreak of some of the family. But you haven't said anything about O.J. Simpson. Are you happy for him? Do you have no feelings about him?
I think the feelings that I have are that the justice system came with their decision and the 12 made their decision.
But mostly you're concerned about the families and about Nicole.
That they're missing forever, yes.
There are some who felt that you were lying or dissembling when you were on the stand to help to protect O.J. Simpson.
Right. Oh, that is so untrue because I had met with the defense, with the prosecution. I was up with the best prosecution team in the world, the best defense lawyers in the world, and they had me at their disposal.
So you said
anytime they
everything you had
wanted
to
me,
say.
they would have brought me back. I was willing to do anything for them, and I met with them, both sides.
Will you make any effort now to be in touch with O.J. Simpson? He was your friend. Will he be your friend again?
I think I'm going to wait to see where the feelings go with O.J. asking about me, or right now I'm just going to live this moment, and I can't answer for the next day in my life.
And you're off to do your own radio show? You now have a daily radio show. Will you be talking about this, or will it be a whole other theme?
No, it'll be court-related, yes.
You will talk
I
about
think it'll have to be, and I'm sure when they call on our station, 97.1, people will be calling at all time.
Thank you, Cato. We've been with you many times before, and we thank you for coming on today and being with us. And Peter, we're going to have Robert Shapiro with us very shortly. Back to you now.
Thanks, Barbara. Difficult for him, unquestionably, a young man who seemed so out of his depth to so many people at various points in this entire experience, clearly having a very emotional morning. Ironically, saying a little earlier to Barbara Walters that part of this process he had grown up, certainly grown up enough to recognize that this was, for so many people in the country, soap opera, from which there will now have to be some withdrawal. And Mr. Kalin saying, for him, it is more of a question of having lost two people about whom he cared quite deeply, Nicole particularly, and focusing down very specifically on the families who have suffered the loss. I want to bring in James Curtis again, if I may. Now, the Deputy District Attorney for Riverside, California. Didn't have a chance to ask you, Mr. Curtis, about your first impressions.
Surprise, relief, those are probably the two biggest ones.
Why relief?
Well, I think that there's a lot of tension for me being involved in the process from this aspect, and as a prosecutor, and seeing my fellow prosecutors, even though in an adjacent county, involved in this tremendously critical and difficult case for them. I felt, really wrapped up in it.
I apologize, I'm going to be unfair with you, but as you note that before the verdict was handed down, I pretty much insisted that nobody speculate about what the verdict was going to be. What did you think it was going to be?
I personally thought it was going to be a guilty verdict. I think that based on the reports that I had received, both in terms of what the jury did when they entered the courtroom and the fact that it was so quick and there was such a significant amount of evidence presented by the prosecution, that's what it would be. But I think that Ray Brown's comments are extremely well taken, and my personal philosophy about the system, I believe greatly in the system, and I believe the juries do make the right decisions ultimately.
Mr. Brown, it was indeed very precise what you said about the sovereign, and if the sovereign is corrupt, then there's some reason to judge otherwise. Can I ask you, though, to indulge us now and look at the trial in retrospect? Did you think he was guilty?
I thought there was a reasonable doubt generated by the inefficiencies and the corruptions of that prosecuting authority and those police officers involved. And I think that human liberty is so valuable. I mean, I've taken verdicts standing next to people, and in most cases they're acquitted, but I've had a few that were led away in handcuffs. That's such a profound experience that if there's a reasonable doubt, we cannot countenance deprivation of liberty. My view was that there was a reasonable doubt. There was some evidence that pointed at him. You had to have some suspicions, but there was a reasonable doubt in my mind.
Okay, thank you very much. Please stay with us. Cynthia McFadden, who's now outside the courthouse. Cynthia, you worked for Court TV before you came to us. You probably know as many lawyers as anybody in the country. How do you think the legal profession has fared as a result of all this? I may be a bit early to ask you that question.
I'm not sure, Peter. I'm not sure how well any of us have fared, if there are any heroes to come out of this one. It's going to take me a few days to be able to sort of come off the experience itself. I think that, as they say in Washington, everything is going to be on the table, though. I think there are a lot of people who feel that there need to be a lot of reforms in the way the system works. Everything from how many lawyers you can have sitting next to you in the courtroom on either side, to whether or not unanimous verdicts are a good idea. Certainly that wouldn't have made a difference in this case. But I think there are a lot of people who are very concerned about issues, sequestration among them, and cameras in the courtroom, frankly. I think that we may be seeing a moment when there are going to be many who reconsider the whole idea of cameras.
Okay. It may not be peculiarly American. In fact, it's not peculiarly American at all, but it was interesting to note this morning that one of the most famous trials overseas, the former Italian Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, who's on trial for associating with the mafia over the time he was Prime Minister of Italy 7 times, they have decided not to put this trial on Italian television, where they like everything on television, because they've seen the results, in their view, of the O.J. Simpson on trial. Cynthia, the prosecution's going to give a news conference in just a second. This is a question for you as a reporter rather than a legal analyst here now. This is a very major loss for the prosecution in department terms and in political terms. Am I correct?
You're certainly correct, Peter. The LA prosecutor's office, the DA's office out here, has a very strong track record when it comes to the run-of-the-mill case. I mean, they get convictions in almost 90% of their cases when they go to trial, and of course about 90% of the total number of cases settle before they even go to trial. The problem is with high-profile cases, and they have had a whole string of high-profile cases in the last several years, including the Menendez trial, where the jury hung, of course the first Rodney King trial, a whole string of cases where high-profile trials, they haven't been able to bring in a conviction. And so this is a real political issue for the DA, who's head of the office, Gil Garcetti. I can tell you from the courtroom, Peter, I don't know if you could see this on camera, Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden essentially looking straight ahead throughout. Several points, Mr. Simpson looked over at the prosecutors after the verdict had been read, and one of my colleagues sitting on the same bench as me said he was sneering. I'm not sure about that, but he certainly was giving them a look that said, you were wrong and I wasn't. I can also tell you that on the way out of the courtroom, Peter, Fred Goldman, the father, of course, of Ronald Goldman, walked by the area where the Simpson family was sitting and is on his way out of the courtroom, said loudly enough for us to hear it on the other side of the room, "Murderer." It was a very tense moment. Prosecutors have got to figure out how to handle this one. Do they say the jury has worked, this is the system, or do they say we have some real concerns about this process?
Okay, we're going to hear from the prosecution in just a couple of minutes because they are going to hold a news conference and talk to the members of the media. Just to remind you, members of the jury are not going to talk to the press now, at least not in any collective way, and I don't believe the defense team is going to either, and the families may or may not, but for the moment they have disappeared from the courtroom. Cynthia, what do you think, as I said, you had a lot of experience with court TV before you came to us. You've got more experience with live court television. Then, what is the general mood among legal minds out there as to whether cameras should be permitted in the courtroom in the future?
Well, I can tell you, Peter, there's a real division. I mean, on the one side, you have people who say this is a public process, and it's important that the public see this process. If it's working, all the better. If it's not working, and then it's even more important to see the process work. You know, you think of the courtrooms up in New England, the earliest courtrooms, our nation's founders. They were huge, had enormous audience galleries, because the idea was that the public would be present. I mean, the whole notion of public trials is uniquely American in some senses. So there is that tradition, and this technology makes it possible where you can't put your hoe down in the field to actually sit in your living room and watch the process of justice. On the other hand, there are many who say, and I must say I'm among them, that the television camera slowed this trial down. Both sides frequently could be seen playing to the camera, if you will. Now, I'm not sure that that's a big enough burden to take the camera out of the courtroom. I'm not sure that there's not more good than harm, but I think that's the debate that's going to take place across the country. And I can also tell you, Steve Brill, who's the head of Court TV, says that he does have some judges coming to him saying, you know, come to my courtroom, I want to show you how justice really works. But on a whole lot of high-profile cases in the last several months, judges have turned them down, that is, turned the camera down, saying, I don't want to debacle in my courtroom the way I see it been happening in Judge Ito's courtroom. So I think this is going to be discussed very hotly for the next several months.
Okay, Cynthia, thanks so much. We'll let you go to the prosecution press conference now. Mr. Simpson is now going to be taken back to the Los Angeles County Jail, where, from whence he will be released this evening. There's already been some talk among his jailers there about how they spirit him out of there and enabled him to return to something approaching a private life, which is going to be immensely difficult. Peter Aronella talks about the civil suits against him. In the immediate sense, where does he go? Does he go immediately to get his children? Does he go into some kind of in some kind of seclusion to try to get his life together? He's been very active all the time he has actually been in jail. Last night, though, however, if not in anticipation of a verdict that went the other way, but as part of the normal procedure, his cell was actually searched, lest there be in that cell any instrument with which he might commit or attempt to commit suicide had the verdict gone the other way. It's standard procedure, but we do know that he's been talking to the officers who've been with him, all of whom we've told have been very friendly with him, have been very collegial with him during the time he was there, have enjoyed his company, we've heard on several times, has been talking to them in the last several hours about how he might best get away from that place without this enormous monster of the press in Los Angeles and elsewhere hounding him until he is able to better control the situation. And if you were with us for one of our primetime specials the other night in anticipation of the verdict, you will have heard us report that there have been discussions between Mr. Simpson and pay-per-view television as to whether or not he would give one interview to somebody on pay-per-view TV in order to try to make some money or recoup some of the money he has had to expend on this trial. There was in some cases a cap on some of the spending. We don't know precisely how much he has spent on the trial, but it did not by any means expend all of his resources. And in fact, as we were saying a little earlier, during the time he has been in prison or in jail, he's actually made a good deal of money from signing footballs, signing shirts, from the general merchandising that a former athlete indulges in. And as everybody now turns and looks to the future of O.J. Simpson in the wake of an acquittal, it would have been a much different discussion, of course, had he been found guilty of first or second degree murder. There is the whole question of how he is rehabilitated in the public mind. You'll recall when he was in prison, he wrote a book called I Want to Tell You. It was immensely successful. It got him $1 million advance. And in at least one fairly national magazine, New York Magazine, the other day, several public relations publicists were asked what they would do about the resurrection of his reputation. Ironically, of the 5, I believe, who were asked, 4 didn't even want to take the case in the first place. But then were engaged to, and all of them agreed that he should drop out of public view for some considerable period of time to let the angst pass among those people who will continue to believe that he was guilty. Remember, in those polls from the very beginning of the trial to the end, a very large segment of the white community believed that he was guilty, while a very large segment of the black community believed that he was guilty. I want to go back to Peter Aranella from the University of California, Los Angeles. I don't know why I say that every time now, Peter. You're practically a member of the family. And at least from one viewer's point of view and reporter's point of view, you have been absolutely fabulous to us. This may or may not be Mr. Simpson on his way somewhere. But in terms of this verdict now, take us a little farther in terms of the civil suits. I know that they're in the works. Will they be affected by this verdict?
No, they won't be affected by this verdict, because all this verdict means is that the government could not prove Mr. Simpson's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, what that means technically is that a juror that thinks, it's more likely than not that O.J. Simpson is guilty, but I can't believe that beyond a reasonable doubt, has to vote for an acquittal. So that does mean, and that's the standard in a civil suit, more likely than not. 2 other points, Peter. Raymond Brown mentioned that when the sovereign screws up, that the defendant should be acquitted. At least that was a suggestion in his message. I'm a former criminal defense lawyer, and I believe when the sovereign screws up, the sovereign should pay. But there is a third alternative here that apparently this jury did not accept. And the third alternative is the sovereign did screw up, that there was police misconduct in this case, but despite the police misconduct, that there was also ample evidence of guilt. That's a more complicated version of life. It's clearly a version of life that this jury didn't buy. And one final point about televising high-profile cases. One of the costs of doing so is that the American public that watched this trial sees themselves as the 13th juror. They might not accept or defer to this jury's verdict because they've seen all the evidence and more themselves.
That's a very interesting last point you make. And by the way, we'll come back to that in just a second. But just let me tell you, there's been all sorts of plans, public and private, as to how to spirit Mr. Simpson from one place to another. And we have no evidence whatsoever that that's him in that white vehicle, that there aren't several white vehicles. So having followed that white vehicle at the very first instance along the freeways of Los Angeles, let us not be misled by another one. James Curtis again in Riverside County, California. What do you think about the resurrection of Orenthal James Simpson now?
In terms of whether or not it's possible, how long it'll take?
Well, both those and yeah, both those, of course.
Okay. I think that it's probably going to take a while. I think for an individual personally, having gone through the trauma that's involved in being prosecuted, there's a heck of a lot of resources, as has probably been illustrated on this program and many others like it, that go into a prosecution from both sides, and it's very, very traumatic. Certainly having had a chance to chat with Christopher Darden over the weekend in San Francisco, he's exhausted, and I'm sure that O.J. Simpson has to be exhausted just from having gone through this ordeal. So it's probably going to take him a while to recuperate. Whether or not it's possible, I think certainly having experienced this type of vindication through the system, that it certainly is possible. To what extent it's going to happen, I think that we'll all just have to wait and see.
But Peter Aranella, does he not, makes a very interesting point that in one respect, we have all been a 13th juror. And so maybe he has been vindicated by the jury, but not necessarily by the 13th juror.
I think that's a very, very good point. I think that it's only time will tell in terms of how he maneuvers through society, but I think that based on the success of his book, which reports have estimated the revenue from that in very, very significant figures, enough to defray a substantial amount of his legal costs that he's incurred with his team of lawyers. If that's any indication, it may not be too difficult for him to get back in the flow of things, as it were, regard to his former life.
Let me ask Robert Philibosian to join us now. Mr. Philibosian, throughout the trial, you have tended, if I may say so, maybe I better have a look at Mr. Filibosian to make sure I'm looking at him before I say this. You've tended, at least in my mind, to be sort of more identified with the defense. Maybe that's a natural outcome, having been a former LA district attorney. Do you think, in this case, rich justice is different from regular justice?
Well, I'm not sure this is a case of rich justice or poor justice or regular justice. As I said earlier, Peter, we don't really know what was going through the minds of those jurors. I have seen extremely competent defenses put on by lone public defenders for defendants in criminal cases. And I know my television counterpart, Leslie Abramson, has said on a number of occasions that even though the lawyers may be good, they don't have the resources for all of the experts. And that certainly is a good point. This defense had the resources for very expensive experts to come in and bring all kinds of evidence to bear. But I think in the last analysis, the jury may have been affected very much by the words of Mr. Cochran, which were apparently scripted by Mr. Ullman, and that is, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. It may have come down to that. We don't know.
It also strikes me that it would have taken not just a talented defense team, but also a resourceful, financially resourceful defense team to find those tapes of Mark Furman talking to the screenwriter, which were so explosive in the public mind and may indeed have been felt by the jury, right?
Well, that certainly is a possibility, and that goes hand in hand with the fact that this case received such massive publicity. And when cases do receive massive publicity, there may be people who have knowledge about the case who will come forward who otherwise wouldn't be discovered, even with a tremendous expense and devotion of time and money and energy by either side.
And just to remind people, because of what you say there, that there is no chance Mr. Simpson will not ever be retried on this crime. He is innocent of these charges for all time. Did you think he was guilty, Mr. Filibosian?
Well, Peter, I'm not going to hazard guesses one way or another. I did say at one point that there certainly was a mountain of evidence, as the phrase has been used, and as Leslie and I have both said on numerous occasions, we have seen people go to state prison and even be executed on less evidence than they had in this case.
Okay, I'd like to bring Raymond Brown back in, New Jersey defense attorney. Mr. Brown, we're getting various reports from around the country that there was a very large celebratory roar in various groups of blacks around the country. I don't want to dismiss the race factor or overemphasize it, so please caution me when you think it's necessary. But you think this is a real victory for blacks against the system?
Not especially, but you have to understand that a trial, for example, to O.J. Simpson and his family and to the families of the victims, this was very personal, and they hung on every piece of evidence. To the rest of us, this is a symbol. This is a metaphor. And to the extent that there remain serious problems concerning blacks in the criminal justice system and a pervasive concern that the rest of America only wants to acknowledge racism in law enforcement when it's on videotape or audio tape, that somehow this is a vindication that somehow, see, we told you this stuff exists. And to that extent, black folks have focused on it symbolically, not having to do particularly with the destiny of O.J. Simpson, but with the continued themes of racism in the criminal justice system and in law enforcement.
Tell me if you agree with this statement that was made by Jack White, a former colleague of mine here who's now writing at Time magazine. He says in the end of his essay this week, blacks know Furman, Mark Furman, is not an aberration. And as long as his brand of bigotry is at large in the land, it may sometimes engender the further injustice that a guilty man goes free. What do you think of that?
I don't know Mr. White, but I like his writing. And in terms of what I said before, I didn't say the prosecution screwed up. I said that when the sovereign is corrupt, meaning not honest and not forthright, there were attacks on the quality of laboratory work, as well as racial issues raised in this case that have to be considered as part of the things that a jury takes into account when it goes to look at reasonable doubt.
Now, you have seen all the polls. You've seen our poll, first to last.
Yes, I have.
You know, the enormous division between black and white communities got bigger with the evidence, not smaller. What do you think this will do to race relations now, if anything?
My sense is, and now I'm talking about something about which I know nothing, is that a large number of non-African Americans seem very angry about the possibility of this verdict. And there seemed a tendency, even by people who I otherwise respect, to say the race card is involved and blacks will identify racially with this defendant. So rather than look at the fact that some group of 12 citizens found reasonable doubt from problems in a state's case, I think there's going to be a tendency on the part of non-African Americans to say this is based on racial solidarity and is the flip side of Simi Valley. I don't think that's true, but I think it will exacerbate it. But here's the point. If, in fact, the opportunity is taken to talk honestly and even painfully about race, it can advance the case. If the opportunity is taken to continue to ignore the deep racial divide, then it'll accomplish absolutely nothing.
Now, you have, at least on this broadcast today, you have more familiarity with the question of rehabilitation than anybody else, because some years ago, Mr. Brown was part of the defense team for a man named Raymond Donvan. Journalists will certainly remember him, who was a member of Ronald Reagan's cabinet, Secretary of Labor in President Reagan's cabinet. He was hounded for months by the media and then found... You still there, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Was then hounded for months by the press. And when he was found innocent, he walked out on the steps of a New Jersey courthouse and he said, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?" What does O.J. Simpson do?
The question Mr. Donovan asked was rhetorical, of course, but there is no place. And I think, to some extent, Mr. Simpson will be tainted in the larger community forever with this. I think the tagline on the story will always be, who was acquitted of the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown. And I think in the larger society, we tend to worship money. I suspect he will make a fair amount of money in the near future. But in the long run, I think there's a taint that attaches to him that he'll never be free of.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly. We're looking at the Hollywood Freeway now in Los Angeles. Does this all seem like deja vu all over again, folks? A different kind of motorcade than we saw the first time. I have no idea where they're going again, but as they go, wherever they're going, various bits and pieces continue to dribble into us. One, a report from the courtroom now that juror number 6, who was the lone black male, raised his fist when the verdict was read and smiled at the defense team, the proverbial unity, fist in the air. But we are grasping at straws now like everybody else. We're told that the prosecution is going to come and talk to the press. We're told that the defense team is going to come and talk to the press. Peter Arenella, if you were a reporter there at the prosecution news conference, what's the first question you'd ask them?
That's a tough question, Peter, because the prosecutors are going to be in no mood to answer honestly any really hard questions posed to them right now. This is a devastating defeat for them. As Bob and Leslie have often suggested on Nightline, there was more evidence in this case, much more evidence of guilt than in a typical homicide case. And so this has to be a bitter, very bitter pill for them to swallow. I suppose I'd have to ask the question of why, indeed, they made that judgment to put the gloves on when their own expert had already told them that the killer's gloves had shrunk. That seemed to be a tactical mistake of serious magnitude, where it's not just 20/20 hindsight. And the second question I would ask them is, why did they vouch for Mark Furman's credibility when, in fact, they had advance warning about problems with Mark Furman's past? They made a judgment they didn't want to hide Mark Furman, that if they didn't call Furman, the defense would call Furman. But better the defense call Mark Furman than have the prosecution vouch for him and then have to distance themselves. Of course, they didn't know about the tapes, but they knew about Kathleen Bell's letter. They knew about serious allegations. They knew about Furman's own words in a disability petition that he filed many years before.
In terms of O.J. Simpson's rehabilitation, of course, he's still now a public wife abuser in the worst possible way. That's on the public record and will always be on the public record, despite the fact that he was acquitted here. I'd just like to ask someone in our control room, do we know that this white van we're looking at has some association with the O.J. Simpson case, and we got any vaguest idea where it's going? There is a deafening silence in my ear. Why do I have the suspicion that this white van, we're certain it's Mr. Simpson in that van? All right, we saw him get in the van, I'm told, but if this is the police van returning him to county jail to process his release, that's fine. We have certainly not seen this much. On the other hand, we haven't had helicopters. On the other hand, he may be going south on the Hollywood Freeway in the direction of Dana Point, where his children have been staying, which raises the whole question of his acquittal and custody, because he now will be obliged to go to a court and ask a court for guardianship of the 2 small children he had with Nicole Brown Simpson. And this change has got to be approved in Orange County in the probate court, because Miss Simpson's parents, Lou and Juditha Brown, were given guardianship of the children last year after Simpson was charged with murdering Nicole. And as you heard earlier today, because Diane Sawyer has been has been so close to the Brown family. They've tried to keep the children away from the trial. They've certainly not been able to watch television, a great relief in that family. And they have, on the other hand, kept her memory very, very actively alive. You may have heard Nicole's sister telling Diane Sawyer earlier today that she'd as recently as the last couple of days come in and say that she had smelled Mummy in her bed. Mr. Simpson, you'll recall in that famous didn't do it, couldn't do it, wouldn't do it speech he made just before after the closing arguments were made, just before the jury was actually charged, saying that he had not seen his children, his youngest children certainly, in more than a year, and they had asked him, as did Jason, his son, and other daughter, asked him, when, Dad, is this going to be in? Just want to stay on record here as being as being suspicious about this white van on Route 110 south in Los Angeles, but my ignorance may be that we haven't had a helicopter shot of it earlier in the case. Robert Philibosian, you know your geography out there better than I do. Does this look familiar to you?
Well, if in fact this is the 110 southbound, that's the way one would get to the airport. And it's conceivable that it could be Mr. Simpson on the way to the airport, where in fact they may be taking him by airplane to some unknown location. It's also perfectly possible that that's a decoy in the van, Peter, as you may be surmising, and Mr. Simpson has been taken out of the county jail in the back of some nondescript plumber's van to some undisclosed location.
Okay.
I think anything is possible.
All right. The sheriff's office has been saying to us that that is him in the car with the private security people. So we'll lay it off on them for the moment, not fully expecting them to play ball with us under any circumstances. But we're going to go back into the courtroom in just a couple of minutes from now because the prosecution is going to have something to say. Everybody in the country, it seems, is going to have something to say. President Clinton in Washington just a short while ago said that the jury's verdict in the trial has got to be respected and that Americans' thoughts and prayers should be with the families of the victims of the crime of which Mr. Simpson was acquitted. Here is the famous Dream Team. All right, we don't fully yet have their audio. But just if we can stay on there, Johnny Cochran in the center, next to him, Robert Shapiro there, O.J. Simpson's family on the right side as you look at it under the seal. We always knew that the courtroom would be used for both the defense and the prosecution teams if they wished to use it for these purposes. Jason's still clearly very moved. And that is O.J. Simpson's sister there at the first, and then F. Lee Bailey, and then Carl Darden on the, Carl Douglas on the left, and waiting to speak to the press, including there in the very front row from the Associated Press, one of the longest running, Linda Douglas, I believe, from the Associated Press, will get the first questions.
Say their name so that you all know who is here, who will be speaking. That will be followed by Mr. Cochran making an introduction statement by the family. Mr. Cochran will then make another statement and then we'll have questions, and I'll recognize those people who have questions so that it's not a lot of confusion.
Howard Harris.
Sean Chapman.
Gerald Ullman.
Carl Douglas.
Johnny Cochran. Lee Bailey. Robert Shapiro.
Bob Blazier, Barry Scheck, and Peter Newfeld.
Shirley Baker.
Jason Simpson.
Arnell Simpson.
Eunice Durden Simpson. Carmelita Simpson Durio.
That's it.
Joella Demetrius.
Thank you all very much for coming today. First, I want to thank God for this verdict. He always directs our paths, and he's worthy to be praised. And at the outset, Jason Simpson, the eldest male child of O.J. Simpson, will read a statement from Mr. Simpson and from the family.
I want to echo that. Me and my family want to thank God, without whom I don't know where we'd be. He's truly
Amazing.
amazing. A statement from my father. A statement from my father. I'm relieved that this part of the incredible nightmare that occurred on June 12, 1994 is over. My first obligation is to my young children, who will be raised the way that Nicole and I had always planned. My second obligation is to my family and to those friends who never wavered in their support. But when things have settled a bit, I will pursue, as my primary goal in life, the killer or killers who slaughtered Nicole and Mr. Goldman. They are out there somewhere. Whatever it takes to identify them and bring them in, I'll provide somehow. I can only hope that someday, despite every prejudicial thing that has been said about me publicly, both in and out of the courtroom, people will come to understand and believe that I would not, could not, and did not kill anyone. My father will have more to say at a later time.
Thank you, Jason, and from the family. We will take questions. I'll just make a brief statement, then we'll take questions thereafter. On behalf of the entire team, I just like to say how grateful we are for this verdict, because we think this verdict bespeaks justice. We never wavered in our faith. We were always optimistic, and that optimism proved right. I'd like to just individually thank all of the team members. Everybody on this team played a great, great part in this victory. There's no question about it. We hung together in the tough times. We always saw this day coming, and now that it's here, we feel really good about it. I pay particular tribute today to Joel and Demetrius, the lady over my right shoulder, who helped us pick this jury. We lost 10 jurors, but yet we still had 12 who we felt did the right thing. The other two people who aren't present that I'd like to thank are Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, who couldn't make it back from New York, but they're in Neufeld's living room today watching this, and we send our love and regards to them. Mr. Simpson, needless to say, is ecstatic. He wants to get on with his life, and we are all ecstatic, so we'll take your questions.
Johnny, a lot of people are already saying that this was a case in which race transcended the facts, overcame the facts. Could you comment on that?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question, Linda. If you watch this trial, if you watch the arguments, then you know this idea of any jury nullification or the idea we didn't have the facts is preposterous. In the opening part of my argument, through a strategy we devised with Lee Bailey, we said that if we could shatter the prosecution's timeline so that O.J. Simpson couldn't have committed this crime, that there would be a reasonable doubt. That's even before we ever got to the socks, the glove, and Furman or anything else. So these pundits who make those statements don't know what they're talking about. They haven't tried cases. They don't know what they're talking about. This was a case based upon the evidence. And so that's all we were saying. There was a reasonable doubt. And when you see a trial that lasts 9 months, where the jury takes this period of time, they have gone to what we said, that if you look at that timeline, O.J. Simpson could not, did not, would not have committed this crime. And I think that becomes very clear. So I think that's a very appropriate question.
Johnny, was there a point during the summation, during your closing argument, that you were looking in the eyes of the jury and you knew something, was telling you something, that you were winning?
Well, it's always hard to say, Joe, but I mean, I felt that they were very attentive. For a tired jury, they were very attentive. And then one of the jurors got up and went out, and when she came back, she'd been crying. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then they all started, a lot of them took notes who hadn't been taking notes before. And I could contrast that with the other arguments. They took a lot of notes, and I felt that was probably important.
Johnny, the jurors went out for 4 hours. Right before this trial, there seemed to be a lot of sadness among the Simpson family. Did you prepare O.J. Simpson for a guilty verdict?
You know, that's a tough question. We never talked about a guilty verdict, and that would have been our fault. But we were so optimistic. We really believed in this case and in O.J. Simpson. And we talked only, even yesterday, when I got back to town last night, I talked to O.J. Simpson last night at 10 o'clock, and he could only talk about going home and seeing his children.
But with the Park testimony, when they asked to see the Park testimony, did you think there was a possibility for a guilty verdict?
Well, you know, what we thought was, you know, we've been around a long time, And what we thought was this, that one or two jurors had a question about the timeline. And I talked to Carl about 5 times yesterday in a row from where I was, and I wanted to know where they stopped, what they heard. They heard, among other things, that Cato Kalin was seen about 10:49, maybe 3 or 4 minutes after those knocks, just like I read in the transcript. It wasn't 10:52 or 10:53 like Marcia wanted to push it back on her timeline. And I felt good about that. So I felt that when you have the rereads are very confusing. You have the rereads, those who have a problem then say, okay, I've heard enough. And they go back in and do their job.
Johnny, this is a question for you or
Okay,
perhaps
sure,
one of the members of the family. I wondered what Mr. Simpson is going to do today, now that he's an ex-defendant, where he's going and where he's...
I don't think we can really talk about that because for security concerns, Jeffrey. But he's going to start his life all over again.
And what are his short-term plans, or is he going to stay in Los Angeles, or?
I think he's going to probably address all these things himself soon.
Yes, Mr. Cochran, you have said publicly that you believe race plays a role in everything. I'd like to know what role race played in this trial.
Well, what I said before, Jim, was that race plays a part of everything in America. And we need to understand that. And then we stop ducking and dodging from that, we'll be better off. Now, basically, in this case, I think that from a standpoint of race, it was introduced by this witness, Furman. This stuff about playing a race card is preposterous. It would malpractice if a man has racist views in a case and a lawyer doesn't pursue that. Anybody who says that doesn't know how to track cases, doesn't know anything about anything. So you have to pursue it because that's your job. So they introduced Furman, and then we dealt with it. But we choose to call it the credibility card. I mean, we pursued his credibility. Do you know that on that jury instruction, a witness willfully false in one material part can be distrusted in others? For all we know, they could have knocked out all of Furman's and Van Adder's testimony. So that's the answer to that. I mean, so I think it became very apparent because they brought him. He was their witness. We didn't call him.
Johnny, in Jason's opening statement, he said that O.J. wanted to pursue the killer or killers in these murders once he gets out. Does he offer any idea or ideas as to who this could be?
I'm sure we'll all talk about that, and I'm sure he has some strong ideas, and we'll be talking about that, and you'll probably hear more about that, Pat, in the days to come.
For now.
With all due respect to the attorneys, I'd prefer hearing from some family members, if I may, particularly the women to my right. What was the last 24 hours like for you? Shirley, Carmelita, Arnell, Mrs. Simpson?
We were prayerful.
Yeah.
We were very prayerful, but we were on an emotional roller coaster. And when one would break down, the other ones would come together and lift them up, and then the next one would break down. So we were just all there for each other.
Mrs. Simpson?
Well, I was always in prayer. I knew that my son was innocent. And I had the support of so many people all over the world. And I know that prayer of the righteous prevaileth much. And I believed in that. And so therefore, that's why I kept the faith. And I had confidence in his representative. Thank you.
Arnell, if I may?
Yesterday was a difficult day, but there was a peacefulness, a calmness for myself, and I know with my other family members. We're a very strong family, and we stick together, and we were very prayerful, and we just knew that no matter what was going to happen, that God was going to take care of us. And we didn't really go one way or the other, but we just knew that God was going to take care of us, and just knowing that we would get through it.
Shirley?
What we knew, when you know that someone is innocent, you are able to hold your head up high. And that's the one thing that our family has tried to do during this whole trial, is to carry ourselves with great dignity and to let the justice system do what it has to do. We knew O.J. was innocent, and we had all the confidence in the world in the team that was put together, and we're just thankful to them, to O.J., to all of you, to all the people that's been so nice to us. We want you guys to know that we really appreciate the way that you have responded to us in the good and bad times. And we want to thank you thank you, thank you. And now, I just feel, you know, for so many months you've been asking me, how do I feel? And I tell you, I just feel like standing on top of this table and dancing a jig. And I just want to thank you guys.
Mark.
Yes, Johnny, do you see this verdict returned as any referendum on the LAPD?
No, I don't want to read a lot of things into the verdict. I mean, I
From
think...
the defense and also from the prosecution, a little later date, Mr. Simpson is still on the freeway. He's just about at Sunset Boulevard, heading home, about 5 to 10 minutes from home now. We're told he's in that van, along with his private security people. There's been a great deal of planning made about how he gets out of the county jail and goes off and gets a measure of privacy. If you heard his son, of course you heard his son there a moment ago saying that his father, in this brief statement, is relieved that this part is over. He'll now go on to raise his children the way Nicole and I planned, and there's no reason to assume that having been acquitted, he's not going to get custody of his children, which have been in the temporary guardianship of Nicole's parents. And then he said something which will undoubtedly get a lot of publicity in the days ahead. He's going to pursue the killers who believes are out there, speaking very specifically to the repetitive prosecution line which they lost on. But if not O.J., who? Because in all this period of time, O.J. Simpson was not able to account for this particular time during which the prosecution argued that the murders took place, in which the defense agreed the murders had taken place. They just, of course, disagreed entirely on the timeline. And there you also hear, again, some reflection of the of the very careful planning in the defense team about the presentation, not only to the court, but to the public. When Johnny Cochran is asked by a reporter here, did race transcend the facts? He says that's preposterous. Goes on to say that Mark Furman is the one who put race on the issue, and he, O.J. Simpson, could not, would not, did not. The same lines that Mr. Simpson uttered in the courtroom at the end of closing arguments, which were worked out in conjunction with his own defense team while he was in jail. So a very careful presentation of the O.J. Simpson position as, I guess to speak fairly frankly about it, the rehabilitation of O.J. Simpson, the accused and now acquitted defendant, begins. And the other thing that you hear from this family, as you hear very often increasingly in America, and you do not hear the news media being so skeptical about anymore, is what got you through this? God got us through this. Johnny Cochran says it, wearing again in his lapel today the same cross he wore on the opening day of his closing arguments before the jury. Every member of O.J. Simpson's family, his sister, his kids, his mother. His mother said, I was always in prayer. I left it to faith. Arnell saying God would take care of us. I felt calm with myself. All of them expressing a view that it was, in some considerable measure, God and their faith which helped to get them through this. Mr. Cochran again.
I could tell today it was going to be all right for us, I felt.
Still try to talk with them?
I would love to, somewhere down the road, talk to them, because they've done a really important task here. I would like to do that.
Johnny, there were many yesterday, and no doubt there will be many today, who are concerned about the rapidity with which the jury came to its decision. There are those who say it appears as if it's impossible, that they hadn't either reached a determination on their own, as the judge had said not to do before they were supposed to, or perhaps had talked to one another, that it seems as if it just is impossible to have reviewed this much material in this short a period of time.
What I think, and maybe some of my colleagues will want to respond to this, what I think is this. When they went out on Friday, you remember that I was at the podium when they had a foreperson already. I think this jury had a sense of whom they respected, and in fact, Tracy Kennedy, one of our former jurors, said last night that they always respected juror number one, and so that probably wasn't a hard decision for them. I believe that based upon having participated in the arguments, that this jury felt the prosecution hadn't proven this case, and when ultimately you talk to them, that's going to be where they came down. If you didn't believe the timeline, if you didn't believe that O.J. Simpson had enough time to commit this crime, that he couldn't go upstairs, change clothes, bathe, throw away all the clothes, the gun, the knife, the weapon, the shoes, and all that stuff, Ms. Clark gave him 5 minutes to do all that. If you think about that reasonably, and then tie that into the circumstantial evidence thing, is that reasonable? I mean, who in America, I mean, you know, you get caught up in all these facts, but you got to look at what the law is. So if they made that determination, it didn't take very long. And if one or two people said, well, let's hear what Ellen Park has to say on the timing, then you have a verdict.
Now, Barry Scheck, who is one of the other defense attorneys who argued in the final argument, has just said exactly the same thing. He believes, though he's not at this news conference, he's in Los Angeles, or actually in New York, because he believes the jury acquitted his clients because they felt there wasn't time for him to commit the murders. Scheck told reporters a little earlier today, you have to prove opportunity with the timeline, and if there is no opportunity to commit the crime, then you must have a reasonable doubt. And that is the timeline to which Johnny Cochran is now speaking again. O.J. Simpson is not very far from his house now, and as we've said before, this is not precisely the same route, but it's precisely the same modus operandi that was followed at the very beginning. That is Rockingham. That is Rockingham itself. That is where he came in the white Bronco after that strange journey he took with Cowlings. We now know that that he had in that car in those days, he had cash, he had a disguise. Jury didn't hear all this, but Rockingham and Bundy have earlier today been blocked off, and yet there is this omnipresent helicopter, so familiar in the news gathering of a lot of American cities, but nowhere more so than in Los Angeles, hovering over this minivan as he comes with his private security people to his own residence up there on Rockingham. We know that residence now in such a familiar way. It was the residence on which the jury was concentrating yesterday when they asked the limousine driver, Alan Park, to come back and talk about his testimony looking through the gate of that estate. And it is there that he will go. I'm not sure his children are there. His children have been with the parents, would doubt very much, in fact, if they are there at the moment. But it is for O.J. Simpson now a chance to go home, a home alone, of course. His friends and his family particularly still being downtown. And while they're still downtown, the defense team talking about it, let's watch this and listen to the defense team. At the moment, this is Gerald Ullman, who was one of the defending members of Mr.
What
Simpson.
you can achieve with resources, we need to take a long, hard look at how many defendants have to run this gauntlet without resources, and what precautions we have in our system to ensure that they too can achieve justice.
With all the faults that you found with the coroner's office, with the investigators, with the crime lab, with the LAPD, do you expect there to be any kind of ripple effect with people that have already been convicted or whose trial is pending?
Let's maybe Lee Bailey.
I have an idea that a lot of the records in which Mark Furman was a witness are going to be carefully examined because the claim...
In his driveway now, in precisely the same place he was a year ago, June the 13th, 1994. Then you'll recall it was getting dark. Then you will recall there was astonishing tension because only his son Jason was there by the Bronco in those days. You'll recall there was a weapon in the car. There was great fear that he was going to do harm to himself, and he walks out of this minivan to be held tightly by, I cannot tell. It looks a little like Al Cowlings. Am I right? Does anybody help me there? It might well be Al Cowlings, who has been his friend and confidant for so long. But what a change from the night of June the 17th, the night of the Bronco ride. In case you have, by some remote chance, you haven't been with us for a long period of time, it's a little after 2 o'clock in New York, a little after 11 in Los Angeles. He was acquitted on all counts. And though we were told and convinced at the time that he would be sort of quietly and leisurely processed through the Los Angeles County Jail, he just took off and has gone home to his small estate in Brentwood, which will now undoubtedly become one of the great tourist attractions of Los Angeles, if it hasn't already. Now, the nation, in many cases, will start to get back to business. In Washington today, they delayed the nation's business in many cases because they recognized that so much of the country was going to be distracted. We'll look back on it at some point and wonder that the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments rescheduled its news conference. Senator Sam Nunn, one of the most powerful members of the U.S. Senate, was going to announce his future plans today. He's rescheduled till the next week. The former Secretary of State, James Baker, was going to give a luncheon address to the National Press Club today. He postponed that. And the State Department postponed its briefing. The White House postponed its briefing. President Clinton even took a break from working in the Oval Office to watch the verdict, actually in his secretary's office, where there's a television set. And the president then wrote this statement, which said in part, the juries heard the evidence and rendered its verdict. Our system of justice requires respect for their verdict. Prosecution is going to hold a news conference very shortly now, which, as you know as well as we do, won't be as easy for them. And at that news conference, I think we can actually cut to its preliminaries now, are members of the Goldman family. Some of these people we won't recognize, but certainly there's Mr. Goldman's father and his sister and his mother with the red hair. And Mr. Goldman, as you know, has been very outspoken. Cynthia McFadden said a while ago that she heard him as he came out of the courtroom. That's Carl Darden, of course. Chris Darden, sorry. Got Chris and Carl moving. That's Gil Garcetti. And that certainly the most famous woman attorney in the United States, Marcia Clark. Be interesting in time to hear how they are judged in their case, but for now it's their chance to explain how they feel.
Everyone who is watching, who's listening to this, to pause for a moment. Remember why we're here. We're here for Ron, we're here for Nicole, and we're here for every other victim of violent crime. Our job is to seek justice. This case was fought as a battle for victims of domestic violence. We hope this verdict does not discourage the victims who are out there throughout our communities, throughout this country, from seeking help. I know there are women especially who are right this very moment living in fear, living in violence. We're asking you to reach out for help. There is new help out there. Think of yourself. Think of the children who are in the house too. Don't wait. If you wait, it could be too late. We are, all of us, profoundly disappointed with the verdict. We want to hear from the jurors before we make any other comments concerning their decision today. But it was clear, at least it is to me, and I think other members of the prosecution team, that this was an emotional trial, and apparently their decision was based on emotion that overcame the reason. Certainly we have received calls and letters from all over the country praising the efforts of the prosecution. This was done no matter what verdict was going to be reached. We had many men and women throughout the country call and thank us for the efforts, many in tears. I am proud of every member of my staff, but there are particular people who made sacrifices. To the Goldmans and to the Browns, we cried with you. We shared energy, and as Chris said, during the most difficult times, we looked at you, and you gave us all strength, tremendous strength. We will never know the loss, really the pain of your loss. We tried as diligently, as hard, as professionally as we could to seek justice in this case. My thanks go to all the law enforcement agencies that assisted us. Los Angeles Police Department, obviously, the FBI, the Chicago Police Department, Department of Justice. But I think most particularly, I still, myself as the district attorney, want to thank the two lead investigators in the case, Phil Van Adder and Tom Lang. Los Angeles should be grateful for the professional job and loyalty that they've given over several decades. There are a couple of companies that gave pro bono services to us. Absolutely first class. Decision Quest assisted us with many things. Many of you saw the pyramid. That was their idea. They did all of this. They invested pro bono nearly $1 million, their own, to help us seek justice. Cognitech also helped us. There were many others who helped. We had restaurants and others who were helping with the staff. I want to thank, too, every member of my office. They helped us. They don't have their name out in front, but they helped us. And more importantly, they helped every day with all the Rons and all the Nicoles that we handle every day. This has been one case. It's been an important case. But literally, we have thousands of these cases. Finally, to our team, to our law clerks, who really worked so hard. These were students in law school who gave up so much to work with us. To the new prosecutors who joined our team, who took and passed the bar and became deputy DAs, and they gave their all. To the support staff from Patty Joe, to everyone else involved, our victim witness people, but certainly to the media relations, special thanks to Suzanne Childs. Suzanne worked the 7 days a week. As you know, she's a lawyer, former deputy district attorney, as well as a journalist. She made your life, the journalists, easier, made our lives easier too. Our investigators, our Bureau of Investigation, goes unheralded, but they did fabulous work. Especially Gary Schramm and Mike Armstrong and several others. They were there whenever we needed them, whenever the families needed them. They were there. Finally, of course, we have the lawyers that you saw in court. Let me thank them because they did a first-class job. To Bill Hodgman, you know Bill, he managed the unmanageable, but he did it. To Alan Yokelson, to Sherry Lewis, to Hank Goldberg, to Brian Kelberg, to Lisa Kahn, to Rock Harmon, Woody Clark, and Scott Gordon. Every person here gave their all. It was a professional effort seeking justice. We had, I perhaps should give thanks to Woody and Rock's bosses, the district attorneys of San Diego and Alameda County. They helped when we needed the help, and again, it was a first-class effort. And of course, lastly, to Chris and to Marcia. None of you will ever know the personal sacrifices everyone here made. None of you will know, too, the sacrifices that the families of this team made. They didn't see their husbands or their wives, the fathers and their mothers, for 16 months. I think on behalf of every citizen who has been looking at this case in an objective way, I think they want me to say thank you. And I am saying thank you. And let me end by saying we deserve to be proud of the effort that we made in this case. I am very proud of the total effort made in this case. We stand here in front of you with our heads held high because we did everything professionally possible to seek the justice in this case. I'm going to ask Marcia and then Chris and then Bill if they want to make any comments or thank you. Now would be the appropriate time to do it. We will then, when they finish, address a few of your questions. But I will also add that because we've not had the opportunity to hear from the jury, they've indicated they're not interested in talking to any of the lawyers. Maybe they'll talk to you. We will withhold further comment for the rest of the day. But let me give Marcia an opportunity to say thanks.
I first want to extend my thanks to the families of the victims, to the Goldmans and to the Browns. Their strength, their dignity, and their support throughout this trial have been tremendous and a tremendous source of inspiration and strength to all of us. My sympathy and my love go out to all of them. And then I'd like to thank the members of our team. You're wonderful. You're wonderful. You've given everything. You've given your all throughout all of it. We couldn't have done any of it without you. You've done a beautiful job. Please don't let this make you lose faith in our system. Please don't let this deter you from doing a job you're so well qualified to do. You're all wonderful. You can make it go right, and you'll have a chance to do it again. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I thank my partners, all of you. You're just fantastic. I can't tell you how fantastic. No one here has spared any effort. Everyone here has put in 110%, given their all for everyone, for justice, for the families of the victims, in the effort to see that the lives of Ron and Nicole were not thrown away. It was a dignified fight. It showed great courage, great integrity, great moral strength. And we have every reason to be proud of every single one of them, and we are. Thank you.
I never expected I would be here in this time and in this place and in this position. If there was anything that ever motivated me throughout the trial, it was the idea, the notion that one day I'd have to turn into the Goldmans and with the realization that he had been acquitted. But that is the verdict, that's the jury's position, that's their voice, and I accept that verdict. We came here in search of justice. You'll have to be the judges, I expect, as to whether or not any of us found it today. But I'm not bitter, and I'm not angry. But I'd also like to thank the lawyers on our prosecution team. I am honored to have
And please give us a moment. I guess I've always been referred to as the calm one, but it is it's very difficult for any of us to speak without great emotion today. The verdict comes as a great disappointment, and I want to tell everyone here, I want to tell everyone in this county And I want to tell everyone in this country that you can be proud to the hilt of the effort made by the prosecution team in this case. This was a classic team effort. None of us, take all the credit, and all of us share in the disappointing verdict today. I've been involved in a number of long or epic trials over time, and I have never seen anyone work so hard in behalf of the people as the team that we had in this case. And that goes from investigator to law clerk to stand-up attorney in the courtroom to research attorney. Every single person here on this team sacrificed greatly to try to bring the Browns and the Goldmans justice, and to bring justice to the county and for everyone. We won't forget Ron and Nicole. We won't forget them ever. And we may have to carry on the fight in their names in a different way after this. But for the Browns and the Goldmans, we're not going to give up. And for Ron and Nicole, we'll never forget you, ever. Thank you.
Let me, if I might, just to clear the record too, I left out a couple thank yous. Daryl Mavis, thanks Daryl. And certainly to my executive staff, my chief deputy, Sandy Buttigia, and Frank Sunstead, the entire staff. I mean, this truly was a team effort. And as I said, one last time before you take your questions, I've been in the office 27 years. I am extremely proud, and every citizen in this county, perhaps even this country, should be proud of the professional effort that was made. We'll take a few of your questions.
Is the Simpson matter over, or would you consider any possible federal charges, and are there any?
It's over from our viewpoint.
Is this investigation now going to be reopened from square one, the whole murder investigation?
Are you talking about this case?
You're going to find the killer?
The lights just went out. It's, I stand in front of you. We all stand in front of you with the belief that the evidence was there. This was not, in our opinion, a close case.
Bill, can we hear from Fred Goldman about whether or not he's determined...
The Goldmans are not going to be speaking.
Bill, you said apparently that this was a verdict based on emotion. I just wanted to see if you could elaborate on that.
I couldn't hear you.
You said that this was a verdict apparently based on emotion. Why do you believe that? Was the swiftest of which it came in?
Well, we have less than 3 hours deliberation after, what, almost 9 months worth of evidence? I don't know. I said I haven't had the opportunity to discuss it with the jurors, so I don't know.
You've done your best. You've had a huge amount of effort and time expended on this, and yet there are people out there in the streets all over Los Angeles cheering for O.J. Simpson. Why is that?
I'm not a psychologist. I can't answer that. I think you probably have more people who are profoundly disappointed with the result. Chris?
Is there one point in this trial that you think is pivotal, kind of turning point one way or another, that was particularly the moment in the whole trial?
I don't think so. Is there? I mean...
Just to follow up on Kareem's question, considering the swiftness of this verdict after 8 months of testimony, is this a legitimate verdict?
We're going to rejoin all this procedure in just a moment. We're going to take a brief commercial break and come back to listen again to a prosecution team, in the words of Gil Garcetti, who believes there are more people out there profoundly disappointed with the result than there are cheering for O.J. Simpson. This was a prosecution team talking to all of us, the 13th jurors. We'll be right back.
This ABC News special report will continue after this message and a word from our ABC stations.
Everybody, every single person in this DA's office, until the other day, I had honest to God, no clue how many people in this office had worked day and night for a year toward one goal, and that's justice. And to each and every single one of them, our profound thank you and blessings. Not to forget Mark, our victim's advocate, backbone. This prosecution team didn't lose today. I deeply believe that this country lost today. Justice was not served. I and my family will do everything in our power to bring about the kind of change that won't allow what happened today to ever happen to another family again. In closing, I only have one other thing to say, because I don't want to forget. I forget a lot of things. To my wife, Patty. To my daughter, Kim. To Michael and Lauren and Brian. My other kids. To all of our deep, close friends. Who have been there for us for this year and 4 months or 5 or whatever it's been. Who have helped us daily get through each day. We'll never be able to say thank you enough. I will forever be proud of my son and my family. Thank you.
Thank you all. A father mourns. Particularly painful for Mr. Goldman going into Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for Jews, Day of Atonement, as he grasps his children and Marcia Clark, who prosecuted the case for the Los Angeles Police Department. It's Mr. Goldman who gives voice to what everybody in the prosecution team didn't quite specify. Justice, he said, was not served. You heard it from Marcia Clark when she said to the people in the department, don't let lawyers lose faith in the system. You heard it from Chris Darden, who said, you be the judge, and clearly talking to those of us in the wider audience than the courtroom. Marcia Clark saying, everybody who's looked at this case in an objective way says thank you. And Gil Garcetti, the district attorney, who's been 27 years on the job, says that they prosecuted this case in the name of battered women. Don't wait. Those of you who are out there living in fear about violence, you could be too late. And giving very obvious, very public thanks to Phil Van Adder and Tom Lang, who were the lead investigators in this case, both of whom were tainted by the defense to some extent in their association with Mark Furman. And while Mr. Garcetti said very clearly this was over as far as we were concerned, They were not going to look for anybody else. They believed the evidence was there. It is not over for the Goldman family, because Mr. and Mrs. Goldman have both filed wrongful death suits against O.J. Simpson seeking substantial monetary damages. These are two back-to-back civil cases against Mr. Simpson, which could take months and even years to resolve. And while the jury trial requires beyond a reasonable doubt, in a civil trial, they only are looking for a preponderance of evidence. And there's no other reward were that ever to go against Mr. Simpson other than monetary award, but it is certainly, as we've said several times before, guarantees that this is not going to be over for him. Cynthia McFadden, our legal affairs correspondent, is with us in Los Angeles. Cynthia, you know this prosecution team infinitely better than I do. Quite frankly, I don't know them at all. But did I get their messages correctly? They were saying to their wider audience in Los Angeles and beyond, the jury was wrong?
Yeah, I think so, Peter. I think they say that while the jury may have declared Mr. Simpson not guilty, that doesn't make him innocent. Remember, the jury doesn't make the determination about guilt or innocence, because innocence is one of the things they can choose. The question is whether or not the prosecutors prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And essentially, I think these prosecutors are saying, even if we didn't accomplish that, that doesn't mean that Mr. Simpson is an innocent man.
Okay, thanks, Cynthia. We'll come back to you in just a moment. I just want to ask James Curtis from Riverside County, who's a district attorney out there in California. What messages do you hear from the prosecution team, particularly from Gil Garcetti there today, and do you think they contribute to community harmony?
Well, I think that's a very, very difficult and complex concept and question, but I think that, first of all, I think your assessment is correct. I think that the prosecution, and rightfully so, as a prosecutor, you believe in your case, you don't try cases, and particularly as a black prosecutor,
Chris Darden.
There's an ethical, absolutely, there's an ethical obligation that we take on. There's a National Association of Black Prosecutors to employ, if you will, a higher ethical standard, to look very, very closely at cases when we believe there may be some hint of misconduct and that kind of thing. So certainly it goes without saying, and it's certainly understandable, the degree to which the prosecution believed in its case and the evidence was there. I think in terms of what this means for the community at large and what message that they're sending, I think they're simply sending the message that they believed in their case, that they think the evidence was there. But I think Chris Darden, although he got very emotional, as Chris is an emotional man, toward the end of his comments, but he said up front, he accepts this verdict. And as prosecutors, you know, it's sort of like what it reminded me of was, you know, when you go through the elections and your party loses, and we see that peaceful transition of government, it's a very, very profound moment. And I think while this may not rival that, it's that same sort of sensation. They accept the verdict, and we have to take from it what we can in terms of what this says about the reasons why the jury came to this conclusion.
Okay, and I don't want to go fishing for something that isn't there, but it really did strike me that when Chris Darden said, you know, you be the judge,
sure,
going beyond the jury, you be the judge to the community, that they're looking for either to sustain their own work as a prosecution team, or they're really out there trying to continue to portray Simpson guilty in the public domain.
Well, I don't know that it's so much to try to portray him guilty. I have to believe, and as a prosecutor, it's my basic philosophy, that once the trial is over, it's really not about the individual, as hard as that may seem to believe. It's really not so much about the person that you're prosecuting, but you simply have the evidence in front of you. You have the information, you've gone over it, and you believe that your evidence should carry the day.
Let me ask Peter Aronella from UCLA. Peter, you've listened now to both the prosecution and the defense give these news conferences. You extrapolate for us what you hear.
I hear a lot of pain, Peter. I mean, the prosecution, to do their job well, they need to identify with the victims, the family members, and that's where Marcia Clark draws her power and her passion. In her closing argument, she was actually quite tired and fatigued at the beginning, but as she began to talk about Nicole's voice from the grave, that's when she found her passion. And this has got to be a very, very painful loss for them. And one other comment, Peter, though it's hard to get into talk about reasonable doubt. Johnny Cochran suggested that the jury acquitted because of reasonable doubt about the timeline. I have a hunch that a few minutes, 4 minutes here, 5 minutes there,
might have been less powerful in the jury's mind than buying the image of O.J. Simpson as a killer. The prosecution's theory of this case paints O.J. Simpson as a psychopath. That might have been too much for this jury to swallow.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And just one quick comment from Ray Brown, the defense attorney in New Jersey, who's with us here in New York. What do you take away from these two news conferences?
Peter, I did have one critical comment, but first I ought to say the better part of grace is not to attack people unreasonably when they're down. You can't understand the Goldmans if you haven't stood in their shoes, and I think only trial lawyers will understand what the prosecution team feels. But when Mr. Garcetti says that emotion overcame reason, it's troublesome to me. Not only does it denigrate the verdict, but it plays into some rather ancient stereotypes about blacks being non-cerebral and non-thinkers at a time when there's public debate about the intellectual inferiority of black folks. So that's an unfortunate comment, perhaps born of grief, and perhaps we won't hear that debated in the coming days.
Well, isn't this part and parcel because this has become such a public case? We're all participants. We're all members of the jury, as we've been reminded so often. This has just gone beyond the courtroom, hasn't it?
We're members of a public that cares. We're not members of that sacred body called a jury, but in a broader sense, there are other comments being made, and to the extent that this trial has that metaphorical aspect we talked about, to suggest that this verdict is born of emotion and not reason is to attack that jury in a way that, in my view, raises some old racial stereotypes we don't need to deal with. I can understand Mr. Garcetti's disappointment. Any trial lawyer can, and generally they were gracious. But I think that comment was unfortunate because it's going to lead to further debate.
Well, point well taken, your comments about all of us. Thank you very much for that. O.J. Simpson is home at his residence on Rockingham. Indeed, that was Al Collings who grasped him in that great, wonderful bear hug as he got out of the minivan. Home for the first time in 400, and I've forgotten how many days now, to be perfectly honest, but it seems like an endless amount of time, but it can't have seemed any longer to anybody else than it did to him, and of course to the parents of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson as well. We'll be back in just a minute.
I used to worry about a lot of kids' cold medicines. The last time I gave one to Sarah, it really made her groggy. I'm so glad there's finally a children's Sudafed.
Only new children's Sudafed cold and cough medicines are all free of drowsy side effects.
It clears up her congestion and cough without making her drowsy.
What did you make? What did you make?
Now we both feel better.
New children's Sudafed. Knock out the cold, not the kid.
Like many patients, you probably wonder about home pregnancy tests. Ask about first response. Most doctors would recommend it. It's accurate and easy. Hold it in your urine stream. Pink, pregnant, white, not pregnant. Most doctors would recommend first response.
Pillsbury introduces a hot, fresh cookie with such giant hunks of real chocolate. Only one word can describe it. Chunky.
Who you calling chunky?
Pillsbury chocolate chunk cookies.
Good answer.
We're proud to announce that this model not only passed that ball bearing test, it surpassed it.
It's my Dirt Devil MVP with maximum vacuum power. Just think what it can do in your home.
Imagine being a little kid with a fever. You're miserable, cranky, and now your mommy wants to take your temperature where? But now there's the ThermoScan instant thermometer. It takes the temperature here, like many doctors and hospitals now do. So you can take a temperature safely, easily, accurately, in just 1 second. And if ThermoScan is easy on this baby, imagine how well it works on the bigger variety. ThermoScan.
ABC News coverage of O.J. Simpson, the verdict, continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Well, thank goodness for Research Department. 253 days since opening arguments began. 474 days in jail for O.J. Simpson, of course, because he was there through the preliminary hearing as well. We just got a couple of things to dwell on or touch on before we leave. We're going to go away now and let you go back to regular programming, though this has really been regular programming for almost a year. Go back to a normally scheduled program. We'll come back at World News Tonight, and this evening we're going to have a primetime special to try to draw this all together. One of the most important aspects of that will probably be Barbara Walters' interview with Robert Shapiro, a member of the defense team who's been a rather dissatisfied member of the defense team in many cases, and was not happy, so the reports go, about the racial dimension of the argument made by Johnny Cochran. We're going to stop calling it the race card on the advice of wiser people, but it's certainly been a factor from start to finish, and he will talk to Barbara Walters about that in a primetime special this evening. But first of all, this is what it was like in the courtroom a couple of hours ago when O.J. Simpson heard the verdict.
County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the...
And his son Jason said a short while later, on behalf of his father, I am relieved that this part is over. I now intend to go on and raise my children the way Nicole and I had wanted it. We'll bring you up to date throughout the evening on World News Tonight. O.J. Simpson has been found not guilty. I'm Peter Daly.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
O.J. Simpson, not guilty. For the whole story, stay with ABC News throughout the day and watch an ABC News special with Peter Jennings tonight at 10, 9 Central.